Pursuit family, welcome to the Pursuit Podcast, episode 2.
Woo-hoo.
My name is Stephanie, and this is Tara, and we are going to be your hosts today. We are excited because we get to speak into something that both of us have gotten to do a lot of, and that's kind of parenting in the midst of this crazy season of change, which is also something that Tara and I are very familiar with. And have had experience with it. I know from my background, I have 4 children, and for a series of, they were all younger, I stayed home with them. I worked part-time jobs in the evenings or whatever, but for the most part, I was home with my kids, and that was just a long season for me. It seems now you always hear people say it's going to go by in a heartbeat, and it does, but when you're in that season, it does not feel like it. But just recently, my youngest is in first grade, and so last year was our first time that we experienced all the kids being in school. And just recently in that too, I moved from working these part-time jobs to working full-time. And that became a huge transition and a season of change for us. In the midst of that, during those 10 years that the kids were at home, I did do the homeschooling thing for a little bit too. So that was another season that I had that Tara and I share. So Tara, tell us a little bit about your kiddos and the seasons that they've been a part of.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like we have some similarities here. Our kids are slightly different ages. I've got one a little bit older. He's heading into his senior year, getting ready to graduate. And then I have an 11-year-old. And parenting through massive life change. We have had so many different things change in our lives over the course of the 18 years that we've been parenting, 19 years that we've been parenting. And a lot of that is stay-at-home mom, work part-time, work full-time. It's have kids at home, have kids in school, homeschool kids, go back to kids in school. It's parenting through seasons of loss, parenting through military upheaval, parenting through my own health crisis. So while we have both experienced a lot of change in different seasons, which require us to parent differently, this is definitely an unprecedented season that all of us have landed in that requires levels of change on every strategy, sort of every arena of life. And so I think we're all feeling that. Just this feels like upheaval. This feels like change. And one of the statistics that we recognized that we are both stepping into. You want to speak to that? You were talking about that with Nick.
Yeah, I mean, the governor spoke into this in one of his updates of just saying 71% of North Dakota's workforce is made up of families where both parents are working full time. And I know a lot of you are in the same boat as us now, working full time and having our kids at home also, and trying to do this distance learning, how much that has just changed our worlds all over again. And how we are trying to figure this out in the midst of it. And Tara, I think homeschooling kind of gave us a different perspective. What is one takeaway maybe that you had from homeschooling that you think could translate during this time? So, we're not homeschooling right now, but we are engaging in this distance learning experience. We're so grateful for the educators who have been working tirelessly to make this happen. But the reality is it's happening in the context of the 4 walls of our house, and that puts tremendous pressure on us as parents. We're feeling it. You're feeling it. There's overwhelm. There's learning curve on every level for us, for our children, for the education system. And so there's a lot, and it's happening in the context of home. And at the same time, we're all jumping onto social media like crazy because we're desperate for connection. Well, what happens is you start scrolling through social media and you see all these people posting those picture perfect moments in their homeschool journey. And it feels, or distance learning journey, and it feels like a lot of pressure. Or you see people losing their minds and pulling their hair out. And so, it's a little bit of everything. But I remember feeling all those same things when I was homeschooling, because there was tremendous pressure to do it
perfectly to, fill whatever the boxes are mentally that you think is going to create the best learning environment for your kids. And so for me, one of the best lessons that I learned in my homeschooling experience was it's okay, A, for it to not look perfect every day, and B, for it to not look like Susie Homemaker's homeschooling experience, or, June over here who has like a schedule that every single hour of the day is marked for something. It's okay for there to be some flexibility and for it to look the way that looks best for your family in this season.
I completely agree. I know for us, when I first started homeschooling, I had nothing but teachers in my life that I was trying to model that off of, and how hard that was for me I felt like I had to provide that same level of education and to do the same things for the 7 hours of a day. And it was not physically possible with 4 children in 4 different grades. There was no way that I could do 7 hours a day. And so I think for me, just that realization that wherever your kids are at, they need different things education-wise, and the freedom to know that, yes, it's going to look different than what the next homeschooling family does, but you have to find that routine that works for you. Mm-hmm. And if your kids are getting on there and they're being able to do some of their distance learning, but your time as a family is engaging, that's a win. That's a huge success part. And I do completely agree with that whole thought of, man, I need to do this perfectly and I need to do this well, but just taking that deep breath and going, nope, I have freedom in this to give myself a little grace. Nobody's done this, and we're all learning. So freedom, when I was homeschooling, I learned that lesson, and I'm relearning it again because that part of me wants to pick it back up and be like, all right, I'm going to be the best at this, and it's not even possible now.
No.
So one of the things that I've come to enjoy through the distance learning is my first grader. I mean, he's been in school in kindergarten and first grade, and he recently was writing. And like, as any first grader does, it takes somebody who knows first graders to know what they're saying. Yes. And last night was super sweet. He decided to make everybody lemonade last night, and then he wrote a note on it, and we could finally decipher out what it said, but it was more or less saying only the VIPs can drink from this. And it was just in his words that you have to like really like, what was that supposed to be?
Right.
And then he's like, look at the next sheet to see who all the VIPs are. And so then it was listing all the people in our families. Like that is a piece, because I haven't gotten to see him write, because honestly, by the time he comes home, he's kind of done with school, and he doesn't want to do any of that. So to see that little piece has been kind of fun in the midst of this time.
I love it. That makes me think of one of the things that happened early on. And, food is definitely my daughter's love language.
Mine too.
She is all about the food and all about the carbs. Chocolate especially is where we're going with this story. So, as all of this started ramping up and she could sense that we were all stressed and we were working extra hours, she took it upon herself to make homemade hot chocolate. Well, this was special because we have food sensitivities in our family. So you can't just squirt this Hershey syrup into the chocolate and heat it up because we're allergic to half the things in Hershey syrup. So she looked up a recipe that uses cocoa powder. Do you see where I'm going with this? And confectioner's sugar.
Oh, I might.
And you do it on the stovetop. And I came home one day and I had been working just without a break the whole day. Come home through the door, and Caitlin has this huge grin, very chocolatey grin with chocolate all over. And that was indicative of what my entire kitchen looked like. I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm trying so hard to say thank you, but it did not come out as thank you. It came out as, are you kidding me?
That's hilarious.
What are you doing? Thank you, but please let me help you next time.
That's pretty fun.
Maybe one of those little new coronavirus habits that I don't want to have continue afterwards.
I think the other thing that I can see coming out of this is my husband is a teacher. He's a 6th grade teacher up at Ramstead. And so he is also teaching his 130 kids, plus he's trying to teach our 4 a little bit. He's been sharing more of the brunt when I'm here working with the production part. And the funny part is we have been doing more meetings at home, more Zoom meetings. This morning we had 2 back-to-back. And the hilarious part is we are not messy people, but we're not like spick and span people. Like our house, I want to be, my desire, and I know my husband's desire is to be, but with kids and the constant, like I swear we just get done doing a meal and we're cleaning up and we're trying to make another meal. And there's always something, everybody's piles of what their schoolwork looks like, their little workstations. We have 6 of us in like one area trying to work. Well, the funny part has come when we go on these Zoom conferences and we have to find backdrops. So on Friday, I had the conversation with my kids. You're starting school on Monday. I need you to find one place in your room, whatever corner it is, and you need to clean it up so nobody else can see our mess.
Oh, wait, we're supposed to invite people into the mess.
And I can only imagine what they're going to remember from that. Like, Mom made us clean this one section of our room. But that's the reality. That's where we're living right now.
It is. Oh, my word. Yeah. That's so, so true. And I think the reality is we're trying to navigate this aspect of parenting in a season where chances are you're living in one of 2 extremes. You're either living in an extreme where you feel like all of the things that filled your life have been taken from you. And now you have big empty spaces that you have to try and fill with your children and try and keep them from, I was just talking to a mama earlier this morning, the broken record of I'm bored with the kids, and honestly with herself, right? All of a sudden her life has gotten disrupted. She is a full-time working mom, but her job has not been what it used to be because of the economic crisis that this is also adding in. And then you may find yourself at the other extreme, which is where Stephanie and I have been living in, of this crisis has increased your workload. Yeah. We've been working, I don't want to talk about how many hours a week, and at the same time, trying to navigate distance learning for our kids, caring for them in crisis, teaching them what it looks like to walk with Jesus in the midst of crisis. And that's one of the places that we wanted to really lean into together was, okay, so the desire of our hearts, and we know that we share this with you, the desire is, how do we not just survive this? How do we thrive in this as Christ followers who love Jesus and are trying so badly to parent our children from a Christ-centered perspective through something that neither they nor we have ever experienced before?
And I remember hearing that just even in the last couple of weeks of thriving and not surviving. And all I can think is, man, if I survive, then I am thriving.
Winning! I made it to the end of the day.
Point, that's where I'm at. And
everyone's alive. Everyone's fed. Exactly. Everyone is in bed. Win!
I made it through another one. Sweet. But I also have felt a huge pressure in that because of the thought of, I want to make the most out of this time. This is what my children are going to remember. They're going to remember our times together or this parenting that I do. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're going to remember the hour I was screaming at them, well, to get your homework done, or no, that wasn't how it is. And that scared me. But I was listening. One of my friends has a podcast, a pastor, and he's been taking us through the Psalms every single night, a different Psalm. And last night was just perfect because on my Facebook feed, I had so many friends that I feel like we were all coming to this at the exact same point. And there was a lot of despair yesterday that I was seeing on social media and that I was feeling myself of, wow, this is overwhelming and having all of the feels. And the coolest part about the psalm that we were in last night was Psalm 6. And it was quick to point out that we are not alone in this, that we are not the first ones, especially spiritually, to feel all of the feels that we are going through right now. And I'm just going to take a couple of verses in here. This is from Psalm 6. And David is talking about how he's been fleeing, and we're not sure which time or what part this part was, but he was fleeing, and he just comes to a place where he's like, "Oh Lord, where are you? Turn, O Lord, and deliver me from what I'm going through." In verse 6, he talks about, "I am worn out from groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, and they fail because all of my foes." But then he continues and he says, "The Lord, though, has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be ashamed and dismayed. They will turn back in sudden disgrace." And the hope that he speaks into, remembering that David was feeling all those feels at that point. And I'm sure many of us have cried, and if not on the couch in our beds at night or in our closets, trying to hide away and put on that strong face. But we are going through a tough time, and it's okay to acknowledge that. I think the guys talked about that last week of acknowledging some of the places that we are at and some of the things that we've been missing.
Yeah. One of the things that I love that Christine Kane mentioned this week is that when you give yourself permission to feel, you're actually inviting yourself into a place of prayer. And you mentioned something that I think is so important for us to remember as parents when we're trying to navigate parenting through this, that we want to put on this strong face for our children. We want to protect them. We want to keep them from experiencing this stress. And yet this is an invitation. This is an invitation for us to model the David model, to model the Jesus model. When Jesus was struggling, he was honest before the Lord with his emotions, with his grief. You look in the Garden of Gethsemane, he invited his friends to come and pray with him, and he poured his heart out before the Lord. And, here I am. This is what it feels like. This is hard. This stinks. And I want to be relieved of this burden. I don't know what the future holds. David didn't know what the future holds, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this sense of coming into that and being okay with owning our feelings. And while we don't want to invoke fear in our children, and we're protecting them from statistics that might cause fear and newscasts that might cause fear, that doesn't mean that we have to protect them from our emotions and from their own emotions. It's a chance for us to step in together and say, guess what? This is the first time you're experiencing a pandemic. It's the first time I'm experiencing a pandemic too. We get to step into this together. We're both doing something. Something that I heard earlier today. This is a multi-generational opportunity for us to grow in faith in a way we never have before. So inviting our kids in, inviting one another as parents in, there is no 5 steps to do this perfectly because we haven't done it before, but there is coming to the Lord and saying, this is how I honestly feel. When you see your kids starting to show those signs of stress, are you feeling XYZ? Let's talk to Jesus about it right now. Let's ask him. Let's remind ourselves of his promises and that he is hearing us when we pray and that he is going to help us out. Those are the success moments, not the perfect distance learning, not the perfect meal on the table every single night, but those moments where you get to connect heart to heart with your child and travel this together in a way that moves you forward into hope.
Yeah. And as we've been looking at that, what are some things that your family is doing, Tara, that has allowed you guys to kind of take that step back and intentionally spend some time with them?
So I was telling Stephanie, we are not the kind of family that does family meetings with great regularity. Like I have some friends, I just think, wow, that's amazing. Every Sunday night you have a family meeting. We don't do that. That's not our jam. But we've done a lot more of those than we used to. And when I say family meeting, I'm not talking about some little perfect picture. I mean, it may just be a few moments, but it is a pause. It's a pause to look each other in the eye and say, what is it that you need right now? What is it that I need right now? How can we support each other in making that happen? Just simple questions to ask each other through this process, asking the kids what they need from each other and inviting them into that. But then, like I was saying just a minute ago, seizing those little moments. I think sometimes we think we have to create something. I have to have this huge family event that's going to make this memorable. You were talking about making it memorable. But when I think back to family crisis moments. I don't remember full long days that were filled from the minute I woke up until the minute I went to bed with some sort of utopic Pollyanna, beautiful, perfect way of navigating through life. There were times when my family was under high stress that my mom was not a perfect mom. But what she did do is she came to me with an attitude of humility and grace, and sometimes asked for forgiveness, because we all need that. We need to ask for forgiveness for our kids when we're the ones that are feeling stressed and we lose it. Inviting them into that and taking those tiny little pauses, just little brief moments. Oh, I see it. I'm just going to seize this moment and I'm going to speak life into my child. I'm going to speak life into my child because I need to speak life into my own world, and even ask them that. What do you remember? What are you hearing from Jesus today? Where are you seeing him at work? What is it you love about him? And just inviting them into that conversation so that you can remind each other and bring hope that way.
I know for us, that whole, again, that intention that I feel like, okay, let's be intentional with this time. And initially it was, what things can we create as a family? And the truth is I can keep up that pace for just enough time, a very, very short amount, because I'm relying on my own strength in the midst of that. And something that just kind of organically has happened in our family is I have had to look at this of resetting my schedule of, what does it look like not to have gyms open or different things? And one of the goals that I had for myself is just fitness wise to get a little bit healthier in the midst of this. And with our beautiful weather that we've had,
Thank you, Lord.
yes, I was like, okay, the one thing I can do is I can get out and walk in the midst of this. And so I started heading for the door, and I'm guessing it's activity happening at the house. So immediately everybody's like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm going to go for a walk. And it's like, well, I'm going to come too. I can come too. And soon it was all 6 of us with the 2 dogs too coming on this walk. And what ended up being just one night of what I thought was me getting fitness has turned into kind of a family expectation almost. Like, this is what my kids are asking me for. They are saying, hey, can we go for a walk? When are we going to do our family walk? And it's so funny because they're helping keep me accountable for my goals that I'm hoping to do here, but also in the same sense, it's meeting one of their needs. And I hope family walks just end up being our thing that we take away from this, as well as that whole opportunity to have those talks. And a lot of times it is the talks about what they're missing. It is the talk about, hey, so-and-so lives there, because they know where their friends live, as we're walking by in the neighborhood. And it has created those places for us just to pause and say, hey, let's pray for them. Or how do you think they're doing? And they're starting to look outside of themselves. And I think that's one of those main things that we're trying to help. I know you talked a little bit about keeping the main thing when we're in there. And so what are those main things that we are trying to instill in our children?
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. We talk a lot about here at The Pursuit about sort of those core values of the walk with Jesus. And I love how Jesus takes all of the faith journey and takes it down to 2 statements. When we talk about how do we succeed when we love God and we love people. And so if we can just keep those main things, the main thing with our children, loving God, loving one another, and inviting them to evaluate their days in light of that, not in light of other people's expectations or in light of it being the perfect way. Because the other part of that, right, is that what looks perfect to us is not going to look perfect to each child. Every child has a different expectation. And so we have to rest in, but did we love God and did we love people well today? And then the other takeaway that I really feel is so important in this season, it's a noisy season. There's so much information and there's so much coming at us all the time. And there's so much social media going on at the same time, and news and everything else. And then we're getting input from the schools, and this is what you need to do. All the stuff. There's just all this input and all this expectation. And I think it's so important to just pause and say, whose voice am I listening to? Because if I'm feeling that panic start to rise, and there's pressure, there's overwhelm, there's anxiety, there's fear, whose voice sounds like that? Whose voice brings those kinds of responses? It's not the Lord.
No.
So when we think about the fruit of the Spirit, his voice is going to bring the fruit of love and joy, peace and patience, kindness and goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And if the voice that we're listening to is bringing anything other than that, we need to put the kibosh on it and say, I'm not going there. I'm going to take captive my thoughts and I'm going to listen to the Lord. Lord, what are you asking of me right now as a parent, as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as a coworker? That's what I want for this day. And I'm going to say no to all the other competing voices. And I'm going to invite my children to do the same thing. What does the Lord sound like in this moment? Can I lean in close to what he has to share and the hope that he offers?
I love that. Well, thanks so much, Tara, for being here. Thank you guys for joining us for this podcast. Like we said, we're excited about this opportunity just to speak into all the different pieces of what is going on right now. And we would invite you guys to help us out. We're in the midst of the podcast, but we would love to hear from you. What are some things that you are really feeling in these times, or some pieces of behind the scenes maybe here at the church that you're interested in learning a little bit more about? If you have any ideas for us for the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. You can email those ideas to hello@thepursuit.church, or on our YouTube where you're seeing this at youtube.com/c/thepursuitchurch. Hit it in the comments below. Send us some information. We'd love to connect with you and bring you some content that you can enjoy seeing and being a part of. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back next week.